The forest floor was covered in pages torn from a journal none of them had written. At first, we thought they were trash. Leftovers from some hiker who'd panicked or gotten lost and tried to lighten their pack. The pages lay everywhere, thin white shapes pressed into damp soil, caught between roots, pinned beneath stones as if the forest itself had tried to keep them from blowing away. The paper looked new, not yellowed or curled, not softened by rain, just placed. We stopped walking without really agreeing to it. The trail behind us had already faded into something uncertain, but ahead, the trees stood too still, their trunks rising like columns in a space that didn't feel meant for us. "Don't touch them," Mira said, though she was already crouching. I heard the soft intake of her breath as she lifted one. "What?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. The others gathered closer, boots brushing over the pages, making them shift with a dry whisper that didn't match the wet ground. I bent and picked one up myself. The handwriting was mine. Not similar, not close. Mine. The same slant, the same cramped spacing when lines got too full. I felt it in my wrist just looking at it, like muscle memory reaching backward. I read, "We shouldn't have stepped off the trail." It didn't feel like a decision when it happened. Just a slight turn, and suddenly the path was behind us, and no one remembered choosing to leave it. I swallowed. "This isn't funny." "Whose is it?" Jonah asked. I held it out. "Mine." He laughed, but it died quickly when he saw my face. "Okay, but..." Mira stood slowly, her page trembling in her hand. "This one, it's about me." We traded pages without speaking. Each one carried a different voice, but we all recognized them. Not just the handwriting, the phrasing, the private shorthand of thought. Jonah's page. I didn't tell them about the noise I heard last night. It was under the ground, like breathing, slow, waiting for me to notice it noticing me. He went pale. "I didn't write that." "Maybe you will," Mira said too quickly. We all went quiet. The forest seemed to lean closer. No wind moved the branches, but something subtle shifted overhead, dimming the already thin light. It was early evening, but the shadows had the density of something later, deeper. I picked up another page. They start reading the pages out loud. That's when it gets worse. The forest listens when you speak. I folded it without thinking. "We should go." "Which way?" Jonah asked. No one answered. The pages continued ahead of us, scattered like a path we hadn't agreed to follow. But we did. Not because it seemed right, but because not following them felt worse, like refusing a direction that had already been chosen. Our footsteps dulled as we moved. The usual forest sounds, distant birds, insects, had thinned into something hollow. Every so often, I thought I heard something else beneath it. A low, rhythmic sound, too slow to be wind, too measured to be anything natural. Breathing. I didn't say it out loud. Mira stopped again, bending to gather 3 pages at once. "These are in order," she said. "I think." She read. "We begin to notice the trees have shifted. Not dramatically, just enough that the space between them tightens, then loosens like something adjusting its grip." Jonah turned in a slow circle. "They all look the same." "They don't," Mira said. And she was right. I hadn't seen it until she said it, but the spacing was wrong. The trees weren't random anymore. They formed loose arcs around us, subtle curves that suggested enclosure rather than growth. Another page slipped under my boot as I stepped forward. I lifted it. He feels it first. Not fear. Recognition. Like remembering a place he's never been, but has always known. My chest tightened. "I don't like this." "None of us do," Jonah said. "That's not what I mean." I hesitated. "It feels familiar." The word hung there, unwanted. We kept moving. The ground softened further, the soil dark and almost spongy beneath our boots. The pages grew denser, overlapping now, some partially buried as if the earth had begun reclaiming them. Mira picked up another. They start to realize the pages aren't predictions. They're records, not of what will happen, of what is already happening somewhere else. She looked up. "What does that even mean?" I didn't answer. I was staring at a page half sunk in the mud. Only a few lines were visible. I brushed the dirt away. He remembers writing this. Not here. Not now. But the memory is there, like a splinter under the skin. The breathing sound grew louder. We all heard it this time. It wasn't in the air. Came from below. A deep, slow expansion and contraction that seemed to lift the ground by fractions, too small to see, but enough to feel in the soles of our feet. Jonah stepped back. No. No, that's not. The soil shifted. Not a collapse. Not a break. A subtle, deliberate movement, like something turning over in sleep beneath us. Mira dropped the pages. We need to get out. Where? I said, sharper than I meant to. She looked at me, eyes wide. Anywhere but here. But the pages formed a corridor now. Not intentionally. Not obviously. Just enough of a pattern that stepping away from them felt like stepping into something worse. I picked up one more. They argue here. It doesn't change anything. The forest has already made its decision. Stop reading them, Jonah said. I'm not, I said, though I was. The next line. He understands too late that the journal isn't theirs. It belongs to the forest. They are just the entries. My hands went cold. The breathing deepened. The ground swelled slightly beneath us, then settled. Somewhere nearby, a tree creaked. Not from wind, but from pressure, as if something beneath its roots had shifted. Myra's voice broke. There's more. She held up the last page. It was clean. No dirt, no creases, as if it had just been placed there. She read. They stop moving when they realize the pages have run out. There's nothing left to read. Nothing left to warn them. We stood in a small clearing we didn't remember entering. The pages ended at our feet. The silence pressed in thick and absolute. I felt it then, not just beneath us, but around us. A kind of attention, not focused on any one of us, but encompassing all of us at once. Like the forest itself had leaned down to observe something it had been waiting for. Jonah whispered, "What happens next?" No one answered. There was no page to tell us. But the ground beneath us began to rise again. More noticeably this time, a slow, steady swell. The trees shifted inward, almost imperceptibly, closing the space. And in that moment I understood. Not from the pages. From the absence of them. The story didn't continue because it didn't need to. Whatever came next wasn't meant to be recorded. Only lived. The last thing I noticed before the ground moved again was a single line pressed faintly into the soil where no page lay, as if written directly into the earth itself. They were always going to end here. Their tent was surrounded by branches arranged like rib cages. I noticed it when I woke to the sound of something creaking. Not the wind. Not quite. A slow, measured flex like wood under pressure. For a moment I stayed still in my sleeping bag, watching the faint gray light of the moon filter through the tent walls. The fabric pulsed softly with each breath I took, condensation shifting, the air inside warm and stale. Then I heard it again. A dry, careful bend, followed by a soft, settling sound, like something finding its place. "Eli," I whispered. Across from me his shape shifted. "What?" "Listen." We both held still. The forest had that hollow quiet that comes late at night, when even insects seem to pause. No wind, no distant calls, just the low, constant pressure of silence. Then, a crack. Not sharp, not sudden. A controlled sound, like something being adjusted rather than broken. Eli unzipped his bag halfway and pushed himself up on one elbow. "Probably branches," he said. "Temperature drop. Things contracting." I didn't answer. Something about the rhythm of it felt wrong. Too deliberate. Too evenly spaced. Another creak closer now, followed by a faint drag across the ground. "Okay," he said, quieter. "That's new." From the other side, Mira stirred. "What are you two doing?" "Nothing," Eli said, but his voice had tightened. I reached for the zipper. "I'm checking." "Don't," Mira said immediately. "Just wait till morning." But I was already pulling the flap open, letting in a thin blade of cold air. It slid over my face, sharp and damp, carrying the scent of soil and something faintly sour beneath it. I pushed the flap wider. The moonlight was weak but enough. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. My eyes tried to make it into something familiar. Fallen branches, debris, maybe drift from the trees above. Then the pattern resolved. Curved lengths of wood rose from the ground in pairs, arching inward toward the tent. Each one mirrored another across from it, forming narrow, symmetrical loops. They were too evenly spaced, too consistent in their bend. Ribs, my breath caught. They encircled the tent completely, forming a low, enclosing structure, each arc overlapping slightly with the next. Some were still embedded in the ground at one end, their roots exposed and twisted. Others had been driven in, angled deliberately. "Eli," I said, "come look." He leaned over, squinting through the opening. For a second, he didn't react. Then he went very still. "What the hell?" he whispered. Mira crawled over, pushing between us. "What are you?" She stopped. No one spoke for a long moment. The branches weren't random. They formed a continuous shape, like the skeletal remains of something massive curled around us. The spacing was tight enough that stepping through would require ducking and twisting. "Did you do this?" Mira asked. "To ourselves," Eli said. "While asleep." "They weren't there before," she said. "They couldn't have been," I added. "We would have seen them." Another creak. We all flinched. One of the branches shifted slightly, its tip lowering by a fraction, pressing deeper into the soil. The movement was subtle, but unmistakable. "Did you see that?" Mira whispered. "Yeah," Eli said. "Yeah, I saw it." We watched, frozen, as the structure settled again. No wind stirred the leaves above. Nothing else moved. "It's just weight," Eli said after a moment. "Gravity. They're loose, maybe. Recently fallen." "Then why are they shaped like that?" I asked. He didn't answer. I pushed the flap open further, crawling halfway out despite Myra's sharp intake of breath. The ground was soft, almost spongy beneath my hands. Damp earth clung to my palms as I leaned forward, studying the nearest arc. It was smooth along its curve, stripped of smaller twigs as if something had cleaned it. The bark was intact but scuffed in places, as though handled. I reached out and touched it. It was warm, not by much, but warmer than the air. I pulled my hand back. "Get back in," Mira said. I did, zipping the tent closed quickly, sealing us back into the dim, enclosed space. "Nope," Eli said under his breath. "Nope, I don't like that." We sat there, the three of us, knees almost touching, breathing shallow. Outside, the forest remained still. Then, a soft, wet shift from below. The ground beneath the tent seemed to settle unevenly, one side dipping slightly before rising again. My stomach dropped with it. "Did you feel that?" Mira said. "Yeah. It's just the soil," Eli said, but his voice was thin now. Another crack, closer, followed by a slow, sliding sound. I stared at the tent wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a shadow moved across the fabric. Not cast from above, from the side. A curved line pressed faintly against the nylon, indenting it just enough to outline its shape. It lingered there, then eased back. The corresponding branch outside shifted with a soft scrape. "They're moving," Mira said. "No," Eli said immediately. "No, we're just our eyes." Another branch pressed inward, this one slightly higher. The tent fabric bowed, then released. "They're tightening," I said. "No," Eli repeated louder now. "They're not." But he didn't sound convinced. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't the same silence. Now it had a structure to it, a rhythm beneath it. A slow, almost imperceptible sequence of movements. Creak, settle, pause. Creak, settle, pause. Like breathing. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. When I opened them again, something felt wrong. The space inside the tent seemed smaller. Not dramatically, just closer. "Did we move the bags?" I asked. "No," Mira said. Eli shook his head. I looked at the wall again. The shadow lines were different. Wait, I said. They weren't like that before. What? The spacing, I said. They've changed. That's not possible, Eli said. Look. He did. His face drained of color. The arcs outside were closer together now. Not by much, but enough that the gaps between them had narrowed. They moved, Mira said, her voice barely audible. We would have seen it, Eli said. We didn't, I said. That's the problem. We all understood it then without needing to say it. They changed when we weren't looking. Another soft crack echoed from outside, followed by a low, grinding shift beneath us. The ground flexed again, more noticeably this time, like something adjusting its position. The branches creaked in response. Mira hugged her arms around herself. They're building something, or closing something, Eli said. I watched the shadows. Another change. Subtle, incremental, but unmistakable. The curves were no longer uniform. Some bent more sharply now. Others angled inward at different heights. The symmetry had shifted into something more complex, less skeletal, more shaped. Do you see that? I asked. Neither of them answered. But I knew they did. The arrangement wasn't just ribs anymore. It was becoming specific. Distinct arcs rose higher on one side, tapering differently on the other. The pattern suggested shoulders. A narrowing. A curve that resembled the contour of a spine, implied through absence rather than presence. No, Eli said, shaking his head. No, that's just our brains. Don't look away, Mira said suddenly. We all froze. Why? I asked. Because that's when it changes. We stared at the tent walls, at the shadows, at the faint outlines pressing closer. Seconds stretched. My eyes burned. Blink, Eli said. No, Mira snapped. Another creak. Something shifted anyway. We hadn't all been looking at the same place. The shape refined itself further. I felt a cold understanding settle in my chest. It's not one, I said. What? Eli asked. There's more than one shape. Silence. Then Mira whispered, How many? I counted the arcs, the overlapping structures, the way certain curves diverged, then rejoined. 3. They're making us, I said. No one argued. The branches pressed closer, their shadows sharpening, aligning with the rough dimensions of our bodies. Heights approximated, widths adjusted. The structure outside mirrored our positions inside, imperfect but improving. A low, deep sound rose from beneath the ground. Not just breathing now, something thicker, alive. The soil shifted again, lifting us slightly before settling. The branches responded, tightening, correcting. They're not copying, Mira said, her voice trembling. They're remembering. From what? Eli asked. No one answered, because the answer felt too close. Another shift. The shapes outside grew more precise. Too precise. One of the arcs bent inward sharply, forming the suggestion of a jawline. Another curved to match the slope of a shoulder. I saw my own outline. Not exact, but close enough that my skin crawled. We have to leave, Eli said suddenly. How? I asked. He didn't respond, because we all knew. To get out, we'd have to pass through it. Through ourselves. Another creak. Another adjustment. The ground pulsed. And for a moment, as the branches settled into their new positions, I had the distinct, undeniable sense that whatever they were building wasn't finished. Not yet, but it would be, with or without us moving. And as the structure tightened again, aligning more perfectly with the shapes we made inside the tent, I realized something worse. The breathing beneath us wasn't separate from it. It was guiding it, learning, growing, and whatever form it was constructing out there in the dark wasn't meant to stay outside.